Next session. This session will feature the session on digital skills and workforce. So now may I invite the speakers, the experts for this session. May I take the privilege to first invite Dr. Ashok Maharaj, the specialist social media and game consultant of Tata Consultancy Services, as part of this session to moderate and lead this session for us. With a big round of applause to Dr. Ashok Maharaj. We have with us an eminent HR leader. He is well known to all of us. We have listened to him in a lot of forums, and we are very privileged to have you here. May I kindly request Mr. Anand Pillai, the Senior Executive Vice President HR and Chief Learning Officer of Reliance Industries Limited, to be part of this session as a key speaker. With a big round of applause to Mr. Anand Pillai. And we have with us an expert from the core industry, Mr. Ramesh Ranjan, the Vice President India HR of Schneider Electric India Private Limited, who will be with us in this session. A big round of applause to Mr. Ramesh as he walks in. We have with us Mr. Kishore Balaji, the Country Head Strategic Government Relations and Head of Digital Skilling Initiative of Intel South Asia. And also we have with us Dr. Rajesh Sav, the Global Head HR of Syntel. So I think we had a good lunch. We should give a big round of applause to this entire panel. And let me hand over the mic to Dr. Ashok Maharaj to give his initial thoughts and start this session.
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome you all to this panel discussion. The session is called Digital Skills and Workforce, and the session theme is the new face of digital India. To debate and discuss this topic, we have Mr. Anand Pillai, Mr. Ramesh Ranjan, Mr. Kishore Balaji, and Rajesh Save. They are going to present, first of all, and then they are going to debate and discuss this topic. So this session basically deals about the increasing demand for digital knowledge and skills among employees in the workforce, and how employees should equip themselves with the appropriate skills for living, learning, and working in the digital society. So first I invite Mr. Anand Pillai to come and share his thoughts on this topic. Mr. Anand Pillai.
So good afternoon. It's actually a challenge to present our thoughts here as panelists. We are trying to give you food for thought when your thoughts are on the food that you just now had. It's a graveyard session, but we'll make an attempt. What I'll do is I'll share some of the facts. My presentation overview is largely structured into these 6 components. So firstly, we'll look at what are the keys of a digital mindset, what are the traits of an effective digital enterprise, and now that we are in the modern workforce, what are the skills, digital skills that are necessary. I might skip on the social media literate leadership, but the cost of lagging in the digital skills, and finally, how do we plug the gap? As we open, we need to recognize and acknowledge the rising Gen Y workforce. It is said that by 2030, millennials will outnumber the baby boomers by about 22 million. Look at our own country. We have, as our Prime Minister puts it, the 65-35 scenario. And what is that 65-35 scenario? 65% of our country's population is under the age of 35. The rising millennial workforce is huge, and they are all coming digital ready. So having said this, we will have to get what I call 5 paradigm shifts. The first paradigm shift that we will, as engineering or educational or academic institutions, is to provide this workforce a vision, yet empower others. I mean, that's going to be a challenge, but you need to give them a vision, and having done that, ask them to give that entire empowerment to others. The second scenario, or the second paradigm shift that we will have to envisage and implement, is give up our controls, but at the same time we have to pay the play the big brother approach in architecting their choices. Because our Gen Y, if you give them complete freedom, I mean, they'll go berserk. So this is a dilemma that is there. The third one is we must develop the ability to sustain what is happening. At the same time, in a selective basis, we must disrupt the implementations that are going on so that new and creative ideas come up. The fourth one is getting into a scenario where you rely on data, and I'm sure our chairman for the session will talk about the big data. But having said that, a lot of things will happen by intuition, and the Gen Y will bring in that. I still remember a conversation between my son and my daughter on this relevance of data. One relies on intuition and the other relies on data. And this argument was going on really very heavily, and I was sleeping as both of them were arguing. And finally, my son, who is a nerd, he put a rest to the argument by this one sentence, and that is, don't argue with the data. Having said that, my daughter was totally silent. I mean, she relied on intuition. So in our scenario, we need to get this dichotomy between data as well as intuition. And of course, the fifth one is learn to be skeptical, at the same time be open-minded. If you have these keys, you will be in a position to nurture a digital mindset. Now, let us go from the employee to the enterprise. So if you look at the enterprise, digital enterprise, what are the 7 traits of a digital enterprise? A digital enterprise is one which focuses on digital value, but at the same time not focus on the digital interactions. A large number of the organizations, they talk of how many hits on the website or how many interactions. Well, that is fine, but what do these interactions yield to? What is the value that is derived out of? So the focus should be on digital value. The second focus as they are hiring is hire the talent for the digital skills and not for the industry experience. Because if you know, this entire digital skills is only about 1 to 2 years. If so, somebody comes and says, I've got 10 years of experience or 20 years of experience, that is not as good as a person with about 12 months of experience or 15 months of experience in the digital space. So look for the skills rather than the length of experience at the industry level. Protect the digital talent from the business as usual. There are a lot of organizations who mix the two. The digital talent has to be given a completely different workspace to work. At the same time, there has the business of as usual. In any organization, there are 2 kinds of business interventions. There is a CTB and there is an RTB. CTB is change the business. RTB is run the business. The digital talent will be those people who will be changing the business. They are the people who will be actually bringing about paradigm shift. Protect them. Their performance parameters has to be completely different from the BAU staff. The fourth one is don't accept historical norms because there is no norm. You can't get into that situation. Challenge the status quo. Question constantly. Keep on getting them to come out with innovative ideas. And having said that, be quick and make sure that you're data driven, as I mentioned even earlier from the employee point. And the sixth one, which is a very important parameter, many organizations make the mistake of giving the digital department a budget based on last year's. I mean, you can't get that. You'll have to get into what we call zero-based budget, because this is a completely new department. You can't say last year the budget for your department was 10 crores, now we'll increase it by 10% or 15%. Chances are you might increase it by 200%. You will have to get into zero-based budgeting as an organization. And the last one, most importantly, seventh parameter is be obsessed with the customers. But the reality that you see, why did all this happen? If you look at the reality, 66% of the millennial care about the social media freedom over salary when looking for a job. And time after time I come across organizations which are putting limitations on the workforce, no for Facebook, no LinkedIn, no Twitter. Even in engineering institutions, I'm sure all of you are having similar restrictions. Keep your cell phones outside the class. I mean, the new workforce is coming in with technology orientation. They are coming with smartphones. I mean, they are in a different world altogether. for you to come out with digital skills, you will have to have a digital atmosphere, a digital arena. And that is the scenario that we have. How has the skill evolved? As you see, in the earlier scenario, we looked at only technical talent, possibly business. Now, if you look at, we have a scenario where it is a combination of the technical talent combined with mobile technologies, combined with analytics, combined with the social media, and that is where we are evaluating the skill evolution. Go forward, and if you see the 6 skills that are necessary: learning to work with documents, collaboration, ability to work with one another. Even though they don't see the person physically, they must have the ability to collaborate, ability to capture their attention. Communication, how do you capture the eyeball? How do you communicate with this new workforce? I mean, I have an awkward situation with my own son. I mean, I try to call him on the phone, he's just not available. I try to send him an email, he's not available. And once, you know, after all this, I mean, he was studying in a boarding school, I hit upon him and I said, what exactly happened? We sent you so many mails, so many, you know, communication. What exactly? You're not able to reach you on the phone. He said, Dad, did you not look at my Facebook update? I said, oh, okay, that's the way you communicate. I mean, how do you get into these scenarios that we have and come out with security policies, at the same time allow them to have the private space? As you move forward, getting these people to switch between cultures is a big scenario, big help that will be there. How do you wield? And I've got a slide on the next one, which is talking about wielding this digital influence and also divide their attention deliberately. Let's talk about the digital influence. If you look at the digital influence, the digital skills, how do you get these people? Create an effective online network. Having done that, you need to build your specialization, build your network position, and move them into a space where they are able to participate in the corporate media initiatives. In our own company, we've got a lot of blogs, we've got communities of interest, we've got a lot of activities that are there where employees are encouraged to participate in the media initiatives, and also getting them to share in subject matter expert forums online, subject matter expert forums virtually, on Link, which is the tool that is available on Microsoft, on webinars, on webcasts. Take them forward and do all these things while they are still at college. Creative problem solving, not in a classroom or in a lab, but across the virtual media, interacting with students from US, interacting with students from UK, getting into that scenario and having the ability to network, form user groups or subject matter expert groups and hire people across all these scenarios. Let's look at the learning curve that is there, and this will enable us to understand where the digital skills can come in. So if you see at any scenario, the new trends emerge, and innovative startups, they create this disruptive models that is on the bottom end of the hockey stick curve. And engineering institutions who differentiate from the others are the ones which are early adopters of these new models. Now, if you take a dipstick in your own organization, as we were sitting there, there were quite a few people who came and asked us for our email IDs. And I know as we go back to the organization, we will be bombarded with a lot of placement requests. But if I give a reverse placement request or reverse scenario or research and ask how many of you are having a digital platform, how many of you have embedded these technologies which we are using, most of them will be found wanting. So adopting these technologies at your workplace, at your educational institution, so that when the people come, they are already employable. The IT industry uses a particular terminology called zero-day billing. That is, on day they are hired, they must be deployable. But most of them have to go through a finishing school. So how do you get into this scenario and move up to advanced implications or advanced implementations of that? And that's where the tipping point is. If you don't reach the tipping point, then of course the laggards drop. A large number of educational institutions do not have students who are able to get that. Now, from a corporate side, let me give you the cost of lagging in these digital skills. The first one from a US scenario, it is $1.3 trillion of revenue is lost in the US economy on an annual basis. I mean, that is huge. That is the size of the total IT industry. Just for you to get a perspective, out of this total 1.36 trillion dollar IT industry, the share of India is only about $126 billion. So there's a huge market out there which we can tap if we have the digital skills. Employers or managers are struggling to fit these digital skills or training, and I'm sure our chairman is going to ask us how we have adopted on the massively the MOOCs that is there. What exactly is happening to address this laggard skills? And if you see in the next 2 to 5 years, the people who are current in their skills, they will be redundant if they have not updated. And that's the big challenge that we are having. So what are the hurdles and how can we overcome? One of the things that we can do is the hurdles. First of all, let me look at the hurdles. About 90% of the companies, I'm not talking about educational institutions, look at the companies, they lack the digital skills. So there's a huge scope for reskilling. There's a huge scope for ramping up and bringing about digital transformations. Only 4% of the companies are aligning their training efforts to the digital strategy. 96% of them are left on the wayside. So the opportunity window is really huge. So these are the hurdles. Now let us look at how can you overcome? The first way is invest in digital skills, and this is a big opportunity window that is available for educational institutions. If you can start the ramp up and develop digital skills as you are teaching, that will be a huge plus point. And of course, turn away from your traditional methods and move into the social methods, move into the digital technology. Subscribe to these online courses. Get your faculty improvement program. Get your quality improvement program of all your senior faculty on a regular basis to make sure that they are digitally available, and make sure that the HR function also is re-engineered in such a manner that weightage is given for new skills acquisition, particularly in the digital area where they are becoming more potential high. As we come to a close, how are we going to plug the gaps? Come out with innovative recruitment methods. Make sure that you don't get into campus placement. I mean, the day one placement where employers come in and recruit the students from your campus is gone. Make sure that the people are available online. Come out with innovative schemes for them to be interviewed online and take them forward. Make sure that you get into targeted companies where you are in a situation where your employees go and interact with the dream companies online without. And those dream companies may be in Japan, maybe in some part of Europe, maybe in some part of US. You don't have to let them physically come to your place. Come out with innovative training programs which are bridging the digital divide that is there. Establish partnerships with technology companies which are already struggling in this area, and make sure that you are a technology partner by way of internships, by way of programs, by way of projects that you can do. And incubate your academic curriculum to incorporate the future trends. Forget about, until very recently, a large number of engineering colleges were still teaching in their electronics course vacuum tubes. That is a subject that is taught in the history. You need to move forward and get into the cutting edge technologies that is there. With that, I want to come to a close, and of course, we'll get on to the thing. This is my, the question that I wanted to ask also is, how many of the faculty are on social media? How many of you are on LinkedIn? How many of you are on Twitter? This is my Twitter details, or this is my social media details. A large number of the faculty themselves are a limitation. So with that, I want to thank you.
Thank you very much, Anand. Now I call upon Mr. Ramesh Ranjan to come to the dais.
Good afternoon. My distinguished friends on the dais, distinguished members on the participation, the academicians, and all the friends. A very warm afternoon to all of you all. First of all, I think I should thank ICT AT for actually coming up with such a very good initiative where they're trying to bring the industry, the government, the academia, and the corporates together in trying to build a digital India. I'm sure all of us are aware that today, even for us to continue to stand where we are, we need to keep running. If we don't, we're going to get pushed in by competition. The world is changing so fast that we don't even have time for us to even just stand there for a minute. If India does not become digitally competitive, other countries are going to overtake us, and it's very imperative and important that India is also on this digital journey. If you see, we talked about industrial revolution in the past, more about manufacturing. It was all about manufacturing to start with. And later on, of course, the revolution was all about distribution. And then in the later half or the last quarter of last century, it was about age of information. And now it's all about age of customers and how we're going to leverage the digitization in terms of providing a customer experience. And everything about it is about being customer-centric. The digital disruption is really changing the way this world is in every sphere of life. The way the personal computer has changed the way in which we compute, be it the convergence technology, is it a phone, is it a camera, is it a personal computer? The way in which the Amazons and the Facebooks have really altered the way in which we do e-commerce, the embedded sensors, and somebody talked about Google automated cars, driverless cars, the way in which Apple, 18 billion revenue, profitability in one particular quarter, much more than India's GDP. A company called Apple can do that. How it has changed the way in which this world is. 3D printing is going to be a game changer. The way in which manufacturing is going to happen, the digital disruption is happening in every sphere of life, in every walk of life. And these innovations are really going to change the way the businesses run and also the way in which we're going to live this life. It's just not one particular sector. Deloitte study shows that it's just not about one particular sector, whether it's a mining, whether it is real estate, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is pharmaceutical, whether it's auto. Every part of the industry, every part of our society is going to be impacted by this digital disruption. And unless organizations take cognizance of this, they're going to be left behind. Let's understand and let's face the reality that technology is going to advance and there's no stopping it. Look at the newspaper industry, at least in the Western world, and I'm sure it's going to happen in the Indian world also. The newspaper industry is almost coming to an end. But the good news is, it also creates a new industry. So as much as there going to be obsolescence in terms of technology, in terms of businesses, in terms of processes, it's also going to throw up opportunities for new companies, new ideas, and new ways of doing business, new ways of doing things in this society. So therefore, the need for digital skills literacy is very, very clear. The 21st century is going to be largely driven by information technology. And as they say, it's a global village. The world is really getting flatter, and therefore, we have to be globally competitive. Just not enough being competitive in a particular city or in a particular country, but it has to be globally competitive. In the emerging economies, the digitally literate workforce is going to be the primary economic driver. So the competitiveness of India, if, as we were discussing during the lunch break, if someone put us to the international roadmap, it was Mr. Narayan Murthy, and the digital industry or the IT industry would really put India onto the international roadmap. Prior to that, India was not a serious reckoner in the world in terms of economy, in terms of business. But thanks to Mr. Narayan Murthy, thanks to information technology, it really became a primary economic driver for India and also a competitive advantage for India. So it requires countries' workforce that is able to demonstrate competencies not just within a country but also across international borders. And I think people who are better prepared digitally will be able to get out of low-wage, low-skilled jobs into higher-paying jobs. And I think employers, as someone was sharing, are increasingly going to look for digital skills rather than your traditional skills when hiring a person. And there is going to be an increasing presence of computing, which is going to transform many of our lives' daily fortunes. So the key question is, how is digital disruption affecting the society, the organization, and the people at large? And how are we going to respond to this? So it's all about change management. And if people thought digital literacy is just for students, it's just for some elite people, just for some corporate, it's not. It's going to change the way in which we live. All living, work, we are all living in a digital network. And as someone was saying, just like we think air is the essence of life in terms of breathing, probably in a few years from now, internet will become something like air that we breathe, that without which you can't live in this particular world. So computing is not just about computers, it's also about living. So look at the way these transactions have altered the way in which we do businesses. Banking, it's no more what it was, say, 10 years back or 15 years back. It's all about online banking, mobile banking. The way in which the retail commerce has undergone a massive change. Someone was saying in the morning, they were able to sell 75,000 mobile phones in a span of 5 minutes, which means every second 250 phones were sold, and that was possible only because of digitization. So the way in which the retail industry is undergoing a major change is largely because of the digital revolution. The portals which enable people to come together, the Bharat Matrimony, the Naukri.com, has altered the way in which employment and marriage bureaus take place, and so on and so forth. All these organizations have been game changers, adopting digital technology in time to bring about disruption into the industry. So literacy is no more just about a formal education. Most of us here are here because we are in the business of formal education, but literacy is going to be seen in the context of formal education and digital literacy. So therefore, we need to incorporate digital skills and have greater focuses, building competencies around this particular area. It will also mean positioning previously requiring low skills, now demand digitally solid skills. I'll share more about it in this particular regard. So what exactly are we meaning by digital skills? At a layman's language, is about operating digital equipments. It's about ability to work virtually, understanding the use of all these systems and processes in corporate world. It's about ability to connect to the media, to the web, and leveraging the social media for a benefit. So as we said, the world is changing. It is not what it was last century, and definitely not what was last 10 years back, and what it was not last even 5 years back. It will change the way the work is performed, what is performed, and also who is going to perform. And it is said by research that by 2020, we are going to face a global shortage of 40% skilled workforce in the world. And companies should ask themselves if they have in place the right strategy in order to meet this supply chain demand. And even 92% of the executives who were surveyed said that they are facing a big issue which is much more complex than it was in the past. And 34% of these executives also said that they are not ready to meet these challenges. So digital literacy is going to become a biggest challenge, not only for an organization, but also for the country, for the society, and for the people at large. Now, who's responsible for this digital literacy? The government, the academia, the industry, and the people. So the government would have to come up with IT-friendly policies, provide the necessary IT infrastructure, support investments into IT and R&D, digitize all the transactions, the records. The public interface should go digital so that less and less human interface, therefore less and less corruption and other bureaucracies. Leverage IT for governance, as Mr. Modi says, ease of doing governance. Focus not just on urban areas, but also the rural India. Encourage reskilling, provide tax breaks. Catch them young, leverage the analytics and trends in terms of decision making, and then of course, digital archives of all the records that we have. So already many governments are in different states gone on to mobile governance, e-governance, and I think it's in the first stage of us moving towards a digital India. The academia, most of you here are representing that. How do you support a digital India? First of all, I think colleges need to invest in terms of IT infrastructure. I still find a lot of colleges still having prospectus which are physical, manual application forms. The way in which you deliver content to your students, the way in which you have archives, it's still manual. Unless we build in an IT infrastructure which is going to digitize, we're going to have a problem. Reskilling of teachers. Of course, digitize all your records, transactions, your interfaces with the various stakeholders. The content delivery and the content management has to be digitized. And then, of course, your review and examinations have to go online. And then the way you communicate to all the stakeholders. Incorporate digital literacy in all subjects. I heard some time back people saying, oh, literacy is only for BTech in computer science, only for some electronic students. Even if it's a physics, even if it's a biology, even if it's a chemistry, even if it's English literature, even if it's arts, we must be able to digitize and incorporate digital literacy in all forms of education. We do not know what is the future going to be. So you would have to envisage what the future is and then work towards it so that people are digitally ready when the new technology comes a few years from now. And it's all about getting set digitally. As for the industry, it's about digital leadership. It's about a digital attitude which is to be driven from the top. Many times, a lot of people down the line are interested, but they don't get sponsorship and support from the leaders. Building in the right infrastructure, digitizing all the processes, transactions, stakeholder interventions, investing in R&D, reskilling the workforce, incorporating digital ready in all products and services. Samsung just recently announced by 2020, 95% of all their products will be communicable and digitally ready, which means any product that they're going to come out with would be embedded with an intelligent chip which will be able to analyze data, communicate data, interface with the various stakeholders. That's about digital ready, and of course preparing the digital workforce of the future. As this particular cartoon says, yes, the large workforce in the organization is ready, but are the CEOs able to comprehend it? Are they able to sponsor it? Are they able to support it? And of course, lastly, the people. Literacy, as I said, is going to be redefined. It's about formal literacy and digital literacy. People must embrace change rather than resisting it. People can be everybody. They must cultivate a digital attitude, as I call it. Start early, continuous learning. They have to prepare for the future. We don't know. There is a factory in Germany which is 100% manless factory run by robotics. And I don't see any reason why it could not happen in India a few years from now. So learning to live with robotics, learning to manage with robotics, the human-machine interface is going to be the biggest skill which is required for people, because every walk of life, every stage, there's going to be a human-machine interface required. The way in which manufacturing and 3D printing, virtual reality, wireless electricity is going to be the in thing. Maybe if 10 years from now, people will shudder or laugh at you when you said you have wires for electricity. It's going to be wireless electricity. So leveraging digital knowledge for career growth is going to be there. So age is no barrier. You know, toddlers are familiar with computers and laptops. Old people, rural or urban, it doesn't matter. They are as much interested in learning this new technology and embracing it. E-Chopals by the ITC, the way in which the farmers are leveraging technology to further the agricultural business. Catch them young. I think it's very important. And then, of course, the way in which education may change, may get redefined. And professionals, no barriers, whether you're a carpenter, whether you're a painter, whether you're a nurse, all of them need to be digitally ready, otherwise they will lose out of business. And look at the way Uber and Ola have changed the way in which the auto industry has, in most of the cities. If an auto driver felt that I don't need to be digitally literate, he would be out of jobs very soon. He needs to be digitally literate for him to be able to compete in the market. And as lastly to end, I would say, you don't know when the transition period will start. The idea is to understand that it will and become prepared for it. Kodak, the pioneer in photography, is no more. It is almost filed for bankruptcy. All others who came subsequently have overtaken Kodak. And I think, as Bill Clinton said, we have a social responsibility. Let's ensure that we leverage digital revolution to also lift the quality of life of the other half. Thank you.
Now I call upon Kishore to come to the podium. Yeah.
No, firstly, it's a little dark out there, difficult to see if people are comprehending what speakers are saying. Firstly, let me congratulate ICT Academy for having pulled together such an event and such a topical agenda for a panel discussion. Obviously, in the center of making the digital India happen to deliver the Prime Minister's vision, there are two large pillars. One is a digitally literate nation, and the second is an innovative nation that will make for India happen. And it's a coincidental that the next track is about innovation. I am not an expert in human resource development, and I wouldn't pretend to be one. At Intel, I run the digital literacy program, And over the past 3 years, we've trained close to 5 million people, and I'm going to take questions on account of that experience. And on today's topic, I found a little bit of a dichotomy. It spoke about digital literacy and workforce development. There is an opportunity to see it together. There is an opportunity to contrast it. The nuance I'm trying to make is digital literacy is about giving people capability to use technology to improve their lives. That's digital literacy to me. The other bucket is workforce development. So today I'll probably talk a lot about workforce development and my perception about workforce development. Of course, lots been said about the hireability, the quality of people, 25% hireable, etc. And I'm sure people here are trying to grapple on how to improve that 25%. To you all, today I'm a bad news bearer, because I'm going to tell you that 25% will probably only get worse unless you wake up to the changing context of technology, changing context of learners, changing context of workforce itself, so on and so forth. Over the next 5-7 minutes, I'll try and articulate what I mean by the changes that we are staring at. And if you don't provision for that change, if you don't adapt to that change, why the 25% will only get worse. These are few trends that are shaping the world. The life expectancy, longevity, etc. have improved. Smart machines are everywhere. Compute is in the middle of everything that we see today, right from an Uber example to a high-tech enterprise example that my colleague spoke about. There's a new media ecology that's being created. Organizations are getting very unstructured or superstructured, if I may. I still remember the old organizations were built to produce, built to sell, and built to monetize. Today, organizations are built to sell, so on and so forth. And the world is getting even more connected. While all this is happening at a macro level, the resource, the people, are becoming more participative, enabled by the social media, and they are connected 24/7. We have good examples of Arab Spring, so on and so forth. That's how people are reacting and absorbing technology. Between all this, the innovation has come down from the lab to the garage to the desktop. That's happening. We need to be cognizant of that. Innovation is no more restricted to a lab. It's gone on to everybody's laptop today. Like I spoke to an audience similar to you some time back, we are staring at a huge tsunami of technology, of changes in technology scenario to come. I'm not reading all of it, but it's good to know that a lot of what we are not geared to handle is going to happen. It's either already happening or it's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years, believe you and me. BYOD, flipped classrooms. You will not be able to stop children from bringing devices. You would not be able to stop children from Googling and telling the teacher that what he's saying is not correct anymore in times to come. MOOC will be a reality. Of course, the debate will be a reality. 3D printing, gamification of content, all this is going to happen. Though I've said 4 to 6 years, a lot of it is already happening today. Internet of Things, virtual assistants, virtual learning, etc. Another significant thing that people need to understand that the technology, the underlying infrastructure for technology innovation is shifting. What I mean to say here is technology moved from a mainframe to a desktop. Now the new underlying infrastructure for innovation and disruption is SMAC: social, mobile, analytical, and crowd. These are 4 buzzwords that are going to keep coming and keep coming back for you to gear up to manage it. The workforce is changing. The workforce is changing, and over the next 3-4 years, you would have among yourself at least 3 or 4 generations of workforce that you have to manage. This is a complexity every organization, every academic institute should be aware. You're teaching different kind of people who are culturally different, who adapt different, who speak a different language. So significantly, like my colleague spoke, millennial kids are going to be in workforce, and 5 years from now, you're going to have the Gen Z in the workforce. They behave extremely differently. Even when compared to the Gen X, millennial workforce behaves very differently. Their gratifications on work satisfaction against salary are different. Their average age that they tend to spend in an organization is different. And their thought about work from home, flexible work-life balance, etc., are very, very different. These are nuances that HR experts and workforce developers have to keep in mind as to how the workforce is shifting. Gen Z, that is people who are born towards the end of the millennium, who will join the workforce by 2020, who are probably amongst you all in your institution today, learn very, very differently, behave very, very differently. They are what we call an epic generation. They don't want lectures. They want experiential learning. They want to be participative. They want to collaborate, participate, and own up to outcomes. They want rich content. They don't want stale lectures. They want to see videos. They want to interact with pictures, etc. And however hard you try, they want to stay connected. You have to gear up to manage this Gen Z if you want the Gen Z to be productive when they hit the market by 2020. Look at the millennial kids themselves. Millennium generation that self was supposed to be technologically advanced. Look at the contrast of how they behave vis-a-vis Gen Z. Millennial interacted MP3, texting, chatting, CD, passing on movies and CDs. Gen Z is grown up with touch, YouTube, video share, so on and so forth. So there's a stark difference in the way they're going to participate and work when they get out of the institutions. If you all thought that you weren't able to manage social media, people's participation in social media, behold, the next generation is junking social media. So just in the US, the Gen Z is dropping out of social media. They want to be more hands-on. Their participation in maker fairs are so high. They want to tweak, they want to make, and we have to account for that. Another thing is the work landscape is changing. The most well-paying jobs that are there today weren't even there 10 years back. The most well-paying jobs that will be there 5 years or 3 years from now are still not created. Reflect on that for a moment. You are teaching to an audience who doesn't know what the opportunity is going to look like, who doesn't know what are the kind of careers that are going to emerge. For a fact, even we don't know. Therefore, our ability to adapt and prepare and lecture and train people is so limited, and we have to be cognizant of that. Certain data point tells me there are 85 million jobs that are going to be vacant by 2020. And these jobs, a lot of it, are just getting created. While we grew up, nobody grew up to say that my kid will be a big data analyst, right? So similar is a switch that's going to happen in the next 5 years, and we really, really need to gear up to that. So a lot of hustle bustle, we've said a lot of problems, technology is changing, people are changing, workforce is changing, etc. There are a few constants that we feel that will emerge. Certain skills coherently among workforce who have to be lifelong learners should be well entrenched and established. These are very, very rudimentary skills: sense-making, social intelligence, novel thinking, cross-cultural collaboration, computational thinking, new media, transdisciplinary proficiency, etc. are skills that need to be ingrained, because then, armed with this, people can make choices for the work that will get created over the next 5 years. This is for the workforce. From a society perspective, 4 years back, one would have lectured that kids in school need 21st century learning skills. But today, I think we are staring at a situation where as things get digitized, as people in society, like my mother and my father, start participating in this digital economy, they need 21st century skills in themselves. Skills like basic digital literacy, critical thinking, problem solving. I think it's going downstream, and there is a need for everybody in the society to have some amount of these skills. So much for the problem statement. This is a very basic view to how institutions and governments can address issues around adopting technology to transform education. So far, we've had many examples where people buy technology, people train people, etc. This is a way to say that there should be a holistic approach to transforming education in the classroom or in the workforce. Towards this, at Intel, we have 4 large programs. One that looks at digital literacy, one that looks at improving the teacher proficiency in classroom, one that looks at innovation in higher education and entrepreneurship. With that, I'll conclude. I'm available for questions, if any. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
The last speaker we have is Dr. Rajesh Save, Global Head, Human Resources in Dell.
So, fellow panelists and all the respected member of the audience, in fact, again, compliments to all of you for coming here and discussing this particular issue. Is very, very crucial for us, and it's not even tomorrow, it's all here and now. And I think that's where we all should be focusing more, because every tomorrow is becoming yesterday so fast. And as we look at it, time is just passing by, and new innovations, disruptions are happening as if there was no yesterday. So I'll just quickly take you through some of the thought processes, and my fellow panelists has already spoken about most of the stuff. So my job is relatively more easy, and I'm going to be touching upon some of the things that they have said. So that's where we are, and in fact, Kishore did mention about the jobs that we're going to be looking at henceforth while looking at it. And in fact, one survey of the Oxford University talks about 47% of the jobs, today's jobs, are going to be automated. And when I say automated, they'll be disappearing in next few years. And just imagine, it's like almost like 50% of the jobs today which are existing are going to be no jobs tomorrow. The amount of disruption which is going to be happening in the society is going to be humongously high. And that's where the worry for all of us, because if you don't upgrade the way exogenous stimuli are telling us to operate, I'm sure it's going to be extremely important for all of us to face the industry for tomorrow. Now, these are a few things which, even Ramesh spoke about, and I'm just trying to kind of put them together on one slide. But if you look at some of the disruptions which are happening in the ambience, in fact, Ramesh did mention about Tesla cars. Right now, for those, and I'm sure most of us know about Tesla cars, but for the first time, almost like 150 years of automotive industry, nobody actually radically rethought the power of disruptive thinking. Elon Musk, for the first time, thought about it, and he created a car without combustion. Most of the cars that we have seen in the last 150 years, come what may, ultimately they were diesel or petrol driven or some sort of fuel driven combustion. Here is a car which is like a computer, and all the new variations that you're talking about are downloaded in a Wi-Fi environment and is charged electrically. There is nothing in the dicky and there is nothing in the bonnet as well. Fantastic disruption. And these are the things which are things of the future. Just imagine an automotive engineer for the future is a guy who knows computers and not combustion. Now, this is one great example of how one job, and in fact, not only one job, the entire automotive sector is going to be radically different as we look in the future. The investments made by all automotive companies are going to be a question mark as we look forward. So this is just one example, and there are several such examples in these areas of robotics. In fact, the software companies, and Anand did speak about RTB and CTB. Now, there's another radical news coming out of the software shops, and they are basically revolutionizing the entire RTB shops by introducing software robos. Now, this is something which is completely different. Nobody's even thought about it. Nobody ever thought that you will have a software robo, right? I mean, we've been talking about robos for the last several years, but this is something completely different. Digital ergonomics is a new field which is appearing from nowhere, and nobody ever thought about it. Kishore did mention about future, and I'm sure, Kishore, I'll agree with you. Probably our ability to predict is not more than 3 to 4 years, and 5 years later, I don't know whether all of us sitting in this room are how relevant are going to be. So these are the few things. One thing which I would like to take your attention at is going to be the security issue, because the more we are having disruption, the more we are creating data, the more we are creating threat for ourselves, and that's where the data security issues, and a lot of companies in the US have Sony, Home Depot, one of the bigger retailer, Target, huge amount of data has been leaked and hampered, and that's where I think is going to be a major issue as we digitally. So there is a huge industry of data security which is coming up, right? Data science is something which nobody knew about 5 years ago. Data security, people are aware of it, but I'm not sure whether they were really concerned about it. Today, everybody is going to talk about it. Internet of Things, of course, you know, Ramesh did speak about it, 3D printing, all these issues are happening. So this is what industry is predicting. And my friends, this is not more than 3 to 4 years, right? In fact, if we meet again after 3 years, this slide would be radically different. Now, this is just a small piece of, you know, data that I picked up. And as I was just kind of, you know, going through some of the things, and please don't take it the way it is, because this is just a case study for those who are particularly in the software industry. And just look at what is happening now. And on your right side is a percentile, and that's the demand. So if you look at Java, and please don't take it as it is, right? Look at the way things are changing radically. And this is again future. When I say future, demand is here and now, right? Most of the things that we're talking about are dropping down. I'm not sure the modern organizations are really ready to even face today's demand. Right? These are the things probably you must be teaching in some of your colleges, and your workforce that you are training for the companies like all the software shops and even the core industry are in the areas which are basically areas of the past, right? Whether it's a mainframe or, you know, testing, or there are several other things that you've been teaching in your colleges is getting obsolete every hour. And new things are coming up every now and then. I'm not sure how effectively and you know, positively you're refurbishing your own syllabus, your own, and that's where I think I'd like to draw all your attention towards it, that this is what the industry is demanding for, right? Conceptually, there are a lot of things which are happening, but I'm not sure whether, you know, to make them digitally equipped in terms of hardcore technologies that you're teaching in your colleges are really, you know, hampered upon, because I'm not sure whether it is in line with what is being done, because most of these software companies and the large ones are running their huge universities, and the need for these universities is because the input which is coming from most of the colleges, it's probably based on the obsolete your technologies that you're teaching in most of your colleges. I'm not saying all of you like that, but quite a few of you autonomous colleges or related colleges would have done the change, but this is just a kind of red signal for all of you. I think here is something which teaches, and this is here and now. This data has been picked up by several portals. You know, what I did is I in fact went to some of the portals, and the future and market demand on the hot technologies which are currently being sold, and that's where it has been prepared. So I think this is something which you know, one should keep that in mind. So then what? That's the question that is there in front of all of us. Right, now this slide probably would change maybe tomorrow or day after that. You know, you have what been talking about, all of us has been discussing about is day in and day out is, you know, Hadoops and the business BI and SharePoint and HTML and all that kind of stuff, right? But is it really something which you need to upgrade upon? Because technology keeps on changing, and if you are going to be probably a master of one particular technology, then it doesn't matter. I mean, in fact, there are several guys that I meet day in and day out, and my colleagues in HR and resource management group, you know, they keep on meeting the people that, okay, fine, we are extremely good in Java. Java is in big demand now. I would like to make my career in Java. It doesn't happen that way, right? So if you're focusing on what things will be there, you know, the students will become obsolete like never before. But I think there's a need to focus more on why. I think that's where it matters the most, right? What is the purpose of this particular application which is going to be there? And this is something which is very important for all of us. Because what will keep on changing? The technologies are changing day in and day out. You know, if one technology is today, it has been made obsolete by another technology. So if you're focusing more on technologies, it will just keep on changing, right? We need to create a workforce which is agile, which is nimble, and which understands the purpose rather than the what part of the story. If you know the purpose, I mean, there's an article which I've been talking about, which I've been reading about, and absolutely radical thinking. You know, they were talking of drones serving in hotels. So you there's no need to have a waiter. You know, there's a digital, glass in front of you. You order for your idlis or dosas or whatever you want, right? And there's a drone which will lift the plate from wherever it is and come to you, right? You don't need a waiter or whatever. One profession obsolete. That is of a waiter's profession. So just imagine, I mean, this is of course a far-fetched thinking, but so what is happening is basically one thing is changing into other thing, right? Nothing is getting obsolete. And then I have a law which I'm going to come to that a little later. But think of retail business, right? In India, I think there was a speak of retail and the law of retail. By the way, I mean, Chennai is a place where where initial phase of retailing started long ago, right? But in all over India, probably last decade was the one, there was huge amount of retailing. If you go to US now, at this point in time, the retail has been replaced by e-tail, right? So probably the dip in profits for Walmart has been replaced by increase in profits for either Federal Express or, maybe UPS, right? So the logistics companies who are into the parcel logistics are getting more and more because e-tailing is in the vogue and retailing is getting out of the vogue, right? So what is happening in short is, the purpose remains the same. The purpose is very simple. The consumer wants something and the something has to be provided. But the what of the story is going to be changing. And hence, I think we should focus more on why and not what. So, from the digital thing, there's one, thread that I always see, we all are connected, but we are alone. You go home, you have son sitting with the iPad, daughter sitting with one of the iPhones, wife and husband are doing something on their own. So you all are connected to the entire world, but some point in time you are alone. So this is, coming from a purely psychological point of view that maybe there is an opportunity for a digital blackout, right? And that's the threat which is going to be bothering us, and I'm sure some of the other day it will come up, and suddenly there'll be a issue with the entire data in terms of what is. So I have a small note before I close in, and this is based on Newton's law of conservation of energy, that the skills do get created but not destroyed. They simply change from one to the other. And that's something which is very important for all of us. Basic programming concepts probably will keep on changing the shape, right? So the names like Hadoop and big data and things like that will keep on changing one or the other day. But fundamentally, what is required will remain the same. So I think that is something which we all should think, and then create our students to be employees who are more agile, more nimble, ready to change their clothes whenever it is required. And I think that is something which is very important for all the future millennials, because if we get into the what part of the story, then these skills will change every 2 years. If the same meeting 2 years later, we'll have a completely different set of skills. So that's where I think I'd like to close upon. Thanks for the patient hearing, and my fellow panelists, fantastic presentations. Kudos to all of them. Lot of knowledge gathering. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much, Rajesh. Ladies and gentlemen, now I'm going to dialogue with them, and I'm going to ask a few pointed questions, and in the end I might throw it open for you all. You might ask a couple of questions from your side. Speakers, it was a fantastic presentation and I really enjoyed listening to you all. Now let me pull you all down from 36,000 feet to sea level, okay? What do you think the academy should do? As most of the audience here are all from the academy, tell me 3 things that the academy should do to skill their students so that they are better prepared for the future workforce. Anand?
What they are doing or what they should do? What they should do. There are 3 things, in my opinion, that they should do. And the first one is a painful one. They themselves must upgrade so that they stay relevant. Because the current generation will not respect, will not take information if you yourself are not digitally savvy. That is as an individual, the professor. And that's why in my talk also I talked about the quality improvement program and the faculty improvement program should not be just on the subjects. It should be on the pedagogy or the andragogy, the way you teach. Largely all engineering colleges teach the lecture method or teach by lecturing. Participative learning, participant-centric learning. So the first one is the upgradation of the faculty itself so that they become digitally ready. The second one is the infrastructure. Academic institutions do not have currently infrastructure that can have online courses available to them on demand. Most of them do not even have video servers where their content is available on the server for them to download on demand. So infrastructure, that is the second one. The third one is connection with the industry. They must be having partnerships with organizations like IBM, Intel or whatever, and large number of these organizations are available to partner. So faculty improvement, infrastructure upgradation and collaboration with the industry.
just to add a couple of things what you said. I think the role of the teacher itself is going to change. Or if you do not envisage it, you must envisage it that the role of teachers are going to change. The teachers are no more all pervasive, who knows everything. Today, I don't think the teacher is really a knowledge giver. The knowledge can be sourced from Google, from the web. It is more acting as a facilitator, as a catalyst who is enabling change to the students and trying to drive education, as somebody said in the morning, trying to drive the imagination. So the role of teachers itself is going to change. I think academics must understand that. And second, I would say that you also need to invest as an organization. You need to invest in some R&D, and the teachers themselves will have to work on research projects, envisaging what is going to come in the future. So that is something which I think organizations, the educational institutions will start working on, trying to envisage what is going to happen in the future. And for that, unless you're going to invest some bit of time, money and effort in research, you're not going to keep yourself updated or keeping your nose ahead of competition.
To my mind, as I reflect on this, academia today has the most difficult challenge. If there are three stakeholders, government, industry and academia, I think among the three, the biggest challenges on the shoulders of academia. There are two or three things that I think should be done right there. One, I think fellow speaker spoke about how they themselves adopt and get adept to technology in their learning, teaching learning experience. Inclusive various things like teacher as a facilitator, etc. The second thing is the way the syllabi are drafted out. I think it's a very cumbersome procedure with due respect. But somehow that logjam has to be broken with a dash of agility. Because of things are changing so fast. But the academic cycles are in a way, and I mean, with due respects, I think it's pretty set. But unless you break that logjam, you will not be able to leapfrog. On a lighter note, the situation for them is such that they don't have time to worry about today because it's already tomorrow in Australia. So they have to move that fast. So I think they have the most difficult job in the room, yes.
Thanks, Kishore. And I would like to just add one, and obviously, all of us have already spoken about most of the stuff and quite a few things were discussed while presenting. But, I call it a P2P portal, peer-to-peer. I think, today we're in the era of data explosion. There's a huge amount of knowledge to learn, and as Ramesh rightly said, one teacher will not be able to serve a group of 40, 50, 60, whatever number of students that you're talking about. I think there is a need to form communities. And these communities would belong to, maybe a data science community, or there would be an agile, which is a technology, or a waterfall, that community, so that each and every student has to learn from each other. I think that's where it's going to be very important, because it's quite possible that a group of students, and together, and there's a space, I think one most important thing is we should get this so-called competitiveness out of their mind. And they have to help each other to learn, because that's how they'll grow. There's enough space for everyone, right? So if you keep on hiding, you share the knowledge, it increases. So I think this peer-to-peer learning, a community learning is going to be immensely important for the future. And that should start right from the college level. And of course, most of the organizations, the big software companies already have communities. So I think that thought process should start from the college level itself. That's one small addition to what the other eminent panel members said. Thank you.
Okay. See, what stood out in all of your short talk is the inertia among the faculty, right? We have a student body which is mostly Gen Y and Gen Z. And as the professor is lecturing, these guys are on their mobile phones checking the veracity of the lecture itself, so that they are constantly engaging the professor with what they found on Google. So there is this inertia among the faculty to embrace social media or the MOOC platforms, or coming out in open and engaging the community on their own terms. So how do we overcome this inertia alone? Not among the student community, not the peer-to-peer for student body, but among the faculty. because, to teach in a school, you need a BA degree, right? But in colleges, it's mostly, if you have a PhD, you are given, a professorship. But they don't have a formal pedagogy itself. They don't have training in how do you handle an engineering student. So most of it can be addressed if there is a formal program for, how to teach engineering students or science students or art students. So would you like to address that from the industry perspective?
Yeah. I don't think it's such a straight line problem. I don't think it's just the inertia. I mean, I'm sure half of the team here would disagree if you say it's just faculty inertia. This is a slide I skipped while detailing. There is no one aspect that if you change, the whole system will change. Just if you train the faculty, it's not going to make the journey happen. He has to have infrastructure to back him. The infrastructure should have content to be used. The whole structure should have a policy that enables usage, incentivizes usage, or inculcates usage. The institution leader should be trained to manage such a changing scenario. So there has to be a holistic view to it. But in running, I think he made a point, right? I mean, in running the day-to-day affairs of the college, do they have the time to pause and make this change happen is what is for them to consider, given the size of the problem that we have discussed. But I would beg to differ. It's not a straight line that there is an inertia, fix the inertia, and things will be fine. It won't.
Yeah, I want to add one thing. I don't think we should penalize the faculty for not, of course, there are some faculty, they teach in such a way, as if they are working they finish their second PhD and working towards their third PhD in boredom. That class is there. There is definitely, but you cannot fix it only with the faculty. Let us go to the very basic thing of syllabus. How many engineering colleges represented here for electronics and for electrical and for computer science, 3 disciplines? They still teach carpentry in the first year, foundry in the first year. Ask and they will tell you. Totally irrelevant subjects. During my time was the time when they moved from a 5-year engineering to a 4-year engineering because certain things. I believe a large number, particularly in computer science, information technology, you're got variations of all these courses, computer science and information technology, all that. That entire 4 years, what the industry needs can be taught, and I hate to say what I'm saying, in less than 6 months. 3.5 years is waste. On the other hand, I think you put a slide, very interesting slide on the skills that are there for the future. Project management is on top of the line. It is not even there on the radar screen of many of the engineering colleges in their curriculum. That is what the need is. In our organization, in my earlier organization and even here, we run finishing schools to teach them the basics of operating system, algorithms. For example, that also, operating system design is on the high end when it comes to the new skills. So what we need to do is a real paradigm shift thinking in the way syllabus is taught. I was shocked when I interacted with my son who's doing his engineering in US. I like a good, he's doing chemical engineering, which is hardcore. So I got all these, piping software and a whole lot of other things. He said, Dad, that's all irrelevant. We don't do all this stuff. If we need it, we will outsource it. We get into core R&D. This guy is in a sophomore. He's a second-year student. And he's already getting to dwell into the high-end stuff. And by the time they're in 3rd year, they're partnering with other academic institutions and research institutions to come out with patents. Catch any master student in India coming out with any patent. So syllabus revision has to go through a massive overhaul to which the mindset has to be there, which has to change. How much of relevant subjects are they teaching? A. B. How much collaboration is there with the institutions? Go and ask them. You are our recruiters. Now all those people who came and asked us for our email ID so that they can send us placement requests. If we send back a request, can you change your syllabus so that we can recruit your people? None of them will be ready. They will continue to teach carpentry. I mean, I like carpentry. I mean, it's the profession of the greatest person on the face of the earth. That's a different story. But having said that, foundry, I mean, the foundry that we in electronics require is not the foundry that is taught. That foundry is the wafer scale or the silicon wafers. I mean, that's a completely different. They don't even know the spelling of that. So we need to reorient the education system in such a way that it is not relevant today, but relevant for the future. Because by the time the student graduates, whatever they studied in the first year is outdated. So we need to get that overall, and a body like ICT Bridge should get into that scenario to make that gap smaller and relevant.
Okay. Yeah.
Probably, you know, three of us, of course, except Kishore, all HR professionals, and I'll be criticized for this thought process, but just, of course, above all this, what two panelists said, I think we need to have incentive schemes, because there are two kind of people. There are who, you know, proactive guys who will immediately jump onto it, and then others who are talking about inertia or resistance to change. I think we need to weave some incentive schemes around, you know, for example, publishing papers, right? Have more incentives around it. This is classic HR thinking, but I think that should work. Theory X works in India best. That's what our experience says. So I thought I just kind of made a small point.
Okay, thank you, Rajesh. Let me take one question from the audience. I know it's lack of, you know, I'm running short of time, but just one question from the audience side. Can the mic go to that person over there?
So good evening, my name is Sivakumar Palaniappan. I run a company called Mastering Mind Academy. To my mind, the whole discussion seems to be very ironic, because most of the colleges, not most, almost all the colleges have a ban on mobile phones, social media and laptops, not only in the classroom, even in the hostel rooms. When that is the reality, how do we expect our young children to be digitally savvy? And I don't know, I'm just, my mind goes into this thinking.
No, that is wrong in your institution. Is mobiles allowed in classrooms? Are they allowed to use the mobiles, tweet about it? I don't know if that is true.
I don't think so.
They are allowed to use mobiles, but how many of them are able to bring their tablets and connect that online? A. B. How many of the faculty? Sir, what is your Twitter ID? You. What is your Twitter ID? Twitter handle? You are in? You are the chairman. But do you have a presence on the media? Do you have a Twitter handle? Okay, thank you. So, problem with many people, I asked you a question, you did not even understand the question. Twitter is a social media tool available for you to interact with other people. So, yes, you are allowing the whatever mobile phones. Question is, how many of the faculty are digitally savvy, are social media savvy? You answered the question just now. That is the challenge that we are facing. We are allowing of the tools, fine, but the institution itself is not digitally savvy, social media savvy. That is ironic, understandable, and that's what we need to fix.
And change has to start from the top.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at this. You know, we heard the term bottleneck, right? All of you know bottleneck. Where is the bottleneck? It is at the top. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. It was a fantastic session, and I am sure the audience also enjoyed this panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, all of you.